Right,
Um,
right, right.
so we've discussed two romantic comedies here. I do want to shift gears and talk about Solaris because that was the first movie that I watched. I watched it on Tuesday, and by the time I got through it, I was deeply moved. I was shaken to the core because
Mhm.
because before I considered myself a film buff. Like I thought I watched every movie there was, but after watching Solaris, I was like, this is a brand new experience. I've never seen
Mhm.
anything like this before. And and after watching this movie, it made me think of a bunch of quotes that I remember hearing. So um so I remember Keith Richards saying, Keith Richards of the Rolling Stone, he used to say, you can't consider yourself a guitarist until you've played a Fender a Fender Telecaster, right?
Mhm.
Jeremy Clarkson, the famous motoring journalist, said you can't consider yourself a car enthusiast until you've driven an Alfa Romeo. If you're
Mhm.
a watch collector, you can't really consider yourself a collector until you've worn a Casio F91W. And I would say you can't consider yourself a film enthusiast until you've seen Solaris, because it's one of those movies where the pacing can be a bit frustrating, but Tarkovsky does this wonderful thing, and you don't even realize it, as you're watching it, but you slow everything down to the pacing of the movie. So we've discussed this before we started recording, but modern filmmaking is very much focused on films being catered to us, right? So we know what we want because the industry tells us what we want. So
Mhm.
you want explosions, gun violence, and all that stuff. Here's a John Wick movie. You want an adaptation of your favorite superhero movie. Here's another Marvel movie. You want fast cars and people, doing ridiculous stunts. Here's another Fast and the Furious movie. So the industry kind of dictates what you like, and you just robotically just go along with it. And it's very formulaic because everything follows, certain beats in order to satisfy, what the audience wants. Tarkovsky doesn't do any of that in Solaris at all.
Mhm.
He goes, and he famously even criticized 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was ballsy because at that time and still today people think 2001 is like one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah.
But I would argue that Solaris, if not surpass it, it's on equal parity with 2001's because of the fact that it's you don't really see any ancillary characters. You don't see any aliens or spaceships or anything like that. It's a story. It's pretty much a bottle episode if you think about it. It's set in one place. It's
Mhm.
set in
Sure.
that space station above the ocean planet of Solaris, and it's about this psychologist who's trying to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah.
So so we we mentioned this before, but with the Girls and Office Romance, these were box office successes in the Soviet Union. They pretty much follow the same, the typical formula that you would see in any rom-com around the world at any time period. Um, but Tarkovsky, he's he, he's really hard to read. Can you go into a little bit about what was it about Tarkovsky and Solaris that you enjoyed, that you wanted to recommend on this list?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a unique film, and Tarkovsky is just a unique filmmaker. All of his films have this line that runs through them. It's it's almost like you're watching somebody's memories and dreams kind of threaded together.
A stream of
And
consciousness kind of thing.
yeah, right, right, right. And he backs it up by really technically savvy cinematography, right? That every image is very carefully constructed and every image is beautiful. And you can't believe that those films were made in the 70s. They look so beautiful and stunning. Every shot, the water, grass, I don't know, whatever he filmed, it just looks really beautiful. And you know, yes, his films were probably never a commercial success, and in Soviet Union, most people probably turned their noses away from it. But there were a few snobs who really enjoyed the film,
Yeah,
and
the
I think
elites. Yeah.
the elites, I'm sure they enjoyed the film because somebody made this film. He didn't make it on his own. I'm sure there were people around him who were understanding and appreciating what he was trying to achieve. But I know that when people get older, they appreciate this film more. When you've lived and you've suffered and you've experienced pain and loss and joy and whatnot, you kind of appreciate how spiritual and metaphysical his films are, and slow pace, no slow pace, really long takes. If you commit yourself to watching the film, you are sure to stay, and you will walk away from the films from the after the film wraps, feeling certain way, and you don't quite know what just happened. Why is this so, like, why am I shaken, or why am I feeling extremely melancholic, and why do I want to call my friends? And so and he always said, Tarkovsky, that he doesn't really worry about he doesn't focus on the audience's experience. He focuses on making sure he expresses his emotions and his memories. Like he digs really deep to kind of remember things, and how a certain memory and certain moment in life made him feel. It's all about the emotion he was experiencing, that he was trying to now bottle it and then kind of put it on screen. It's less about plot, even though there is a plot line here, as you described. The psychologist has to travel to space station where he has to figure out why all the members of the crew went insane, and then he goes insane himself by the end, and he's haunted by this woman who I think it was his ex-wife or someone. Yeah, so it's very much that. It's very much, don't overthink it. Just let it kind of envelope you and surround you, and just give into it. That's that's the experience I would suggest with his films. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, because memory, like you said, memories do play a huge role in how he structures the narrative, and in Solaris you see that a lot. I mean, from the very beginning, when I think it's like a committee, they're interviewing Burton, they're asking about what he saw on the planet. I mean, that's the first experience of memory, but it's memory of a different type, if that makes any sense. It's not organic as what we see Klein experience later on, where he remembers his childhood, or where he sees his mother as a younger woman. With Burton, it's sort of this manufactured memory where he's trying to remember what he saw, because if you remember, he said that he saw like a 4-foot-meter child standing on the planet's surface, and when they go and try to watch the footage, there's nothing there. But Burton insists, I know what I saw. I know what I saw, and I saw a 4-foot-meter child there. And then later on, when Burton talks to Klein before he leaves Earth, he says, there's something I should have mentioned, is that the child had the face of one of the crew members' kids. And I thought, that's really, really weird. Like, so already he not only is Tarkovsky playing with your head, but I kind of get the feeling he's also playing with the concept of memory itself, because because people can choose to remember one thing, but then something can be presented elsewhere where people remember things differently, right? It's that notion where people will have two different memories of the same event, right?
Yeah.
So in the case of Burton, he remembers Solaris as one thing, but the video that's played for the committee shows something else. So what do you think about the way that Tarkovsky plays with the concept of memory? Because I feel like that was a recurring theme throughout the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to me, he doesn't even bother explaining everything, right? It all, I'm sure it all made sense to him when he was designing the film, when he was structuring it. It all made sense to him, but he didn't bother explaining and laying everything out,
Yeah,
neatly in the shelves. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, if you think about it, he presented the evidence to you, and then he was like, "Here it is. Make what you will with it."
Все началось после того, как мы провели эксперимент с рентгеном. Воздействовали на поверхность океана сильным пучком рентгеновских лучей. Но я не понимаю. Очевидно, океан ответил на жесткое излучение каким-нибудь другим, прозондировал им наши мозги и извлек из них что-то вроде островков памяти.
That's what I thought I got from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a kind of a master finding his own visual language, his own storytelling and visual language, And again, can we talk about Christopher Nolan and how he structures his films? There are a lot of elements reminiscent of Tarkovsky in his sci-fi films, but he wants to reach the audience, so his films are more structured, have more elements of traditional structure and character development. He wants it to be more understandable by most people, whereas Tarkovsky completely forgoes all of that stuff. He doesn't worry about that. And again, I can only, when I talk about Tarkovsky's film, I can only talk about how I feel about them as opposed to what I understand and what I know about this film. I just can't. If we could have a separate conversation where I have to go and watch the film again, but I'm gonna watch it slowly and make notes. Oh, this element, because it will take me probably a month to do that with one film of his.
Yeah,
it's that layered, it's that abstract in a way. So yeah, but if you ask what my preference is, I would rather talk about how I feel about it and what emotions and I was experiencing watching it, as opposed to trying to find an explanation. It's to me, it's difficult to pinpoint specific elements in it.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because we did talk about the Tarkovsky elements that we see in Nolan. I feel like with Nolan, I think he's the best. I don't know what the best word would be. Best either transmitter or translator of Tarkovsky's ideas into the Western world, into Western filmmaking, because what we see in Solaris is very similar to what you see with Inception, especially with the lead characters having to come to terms with what happened to their spouses, because in both cases, both of them had to deal with dead spouses. I think in both cases they committed suicide as well.
I believe so. Yeah.
So what I really enjoy about Tarkovsky is the fact that because with most Hollywood filmmakers, they spoon feed things to you. Like they have to tell you, okay, now this is where they pull out the gun. This is where they say the line. Go ahead and make my day. Whereas I feel like with Tarkovsky, he sort of trusts the audience will know where he's going, and if the audience goes in a completely different direction, he's okay with that, because he understands not everyone's going to have come to the same conclusion that he does.
Должен вам сказать, что мы вовсе не хотим завоевывать никакой космос. Мы хотим расширить Землю до его границ. Мы не знаем, что делать с иными мирами. Нам не нужно других миров. Нам нужно зеркало.
But I want to ask you, because in Solaris, Klein has to confront the fact that he's seeing his dead wife, who died 10 years ago, and what I found really, really ridiculous was the fact that when he first sees his wife, he can't quite make out what's going on here, so he tricks her into going to the rocket. He launches it, and in the process, he sets himself on fire. And then Snout comes in and is like, "Oh yeah, these are visitors. They usually come in the evening time, and after a while, you kind of get used to it." So then, so Snout is sort of like coaching Klein on how to deal with it, because he's not quite sure on what's going on here, and you want to know what's ironic and what's funny is the fact that originally, Klein's there to like psychoanalyze and help the crew, but in the end, they're sort of helping him process what's going on. So I just want to get your take on the whole thing, because it's just so mind-boggling. There's just so many things coming at you at once.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and my interpretation was that this planet or the station that they're on is kind of like the other world, where do we go when we die? He asks all those questions in this film, I think. What
Yeah.
happens to us when we die? Are we visited by our loved ones that passed? And where does that happen? How does that happen? Do they actually appear as they were, or do they appear as something abstract? And his dead wife, when she appeared to him, she wasn't necessarily always behaving as a human, and her personality was kind of like shifty, and I felt like she was trying to trick him, or she was trying to play with his mind a little bit. Yeah, it's just that metaphysical, spiritual questioning. All there again, he introduces more questions than answers in a way. And as you were kind of alluding to, he doesn't treat the audience. I don't even think he thinks about the audience. But even if he did think about the audience, he knew that they were smart enough to put their own interpretation to it, put their own stamp on what's going on. And he didn't want to. He never spoon-fed anything or over-explained anything. Here are my questions, and here are some of the answers that how I see them. But I'm not telling you that's what you should be. You should know this. You just know what you know, and you experiences this as you would experience it.
I was going to say too, because with the way that the characters interact with each other, it's like watching a play, really, and it's even broken up into different parts too. So that's what makes it even more fascinating. I do want to ask you about what you thought of the technical aspect, because it's very minimalistic for the most part, because apart from that brief shot of the family house that you see on Earth, everything takes place in the space station. And the way that the space station is designed, it looks futuristic, but it looks contemporary at the same time, right? Like I could believe that building could exist today, because it just has that utilitarian used look about it. And I read somewhere that Tarkovsky intentionally made it look that way because he wanted it to feel organic and lived in, not like what you would see in Star Trek, for instance, where everything's clean and nice and there's like no trash everywhere. And the crew themselves, they look really, really disheveled and everything. And for the most part, we also don't see that many shots of the planet, apart from just like the swirling of the tide every now and then. So what did you think about the way that the film was shot and the way that the sets were constructed? Because because the set in itself was a character just as much as the human characters were, or even the planet was in the film.
Right. Well, when I think about the technical aspects of this film in particular, is there is the sci-fi element, the space station and the equipment and their little cabins on a space station with the sliding doors, and I could only assume that their budget was not as big as the Space Odyssey budget, so they had to work with what they had. But perhaps also he didn't want to pull our attention to those elements either. He wanted to kind of be pulled into the background. It's not about the space, the design of the space station or the planet or this mass that revolves around the planet that they're trying to watch through the window. It's not about he didn't want us to focus on that necessarily and be like, oh, that's so cool. No. He didn't want us to do that. That's my assumption. He just wanted us to stay with the character and what he was going through, the memories, again, the memories and the going insane slowly and having these visions. So perhaps it's that, but also I do feel like maybe he might had I'm just trying to guess. He might have wanted to do something more technical and visual with the spaceship and the planet, but there was just no technology or budget available. I mean, it's possible.
But the way he did it was just so masterful because the shots and
Yeah.
everything were just so beautiful. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who studies film should at least study one Tarkovsky film. And if you have to study one Tarkovsky film, it would have to be Solaris because of the way that he employs these shots and the use of sound too. Because there are instances where there's no music; it's just him walking along, but yet it just works. Because and I even imagined it too. I was playing in my mind like, what happens if you put music over it, and I did, and I was like, it would just ruin it. It's much better to have that stark, naked sound of him just walking, along the space station. What I also really found interesting is the fact that they kept focusing on certain paintings because you'll notice that when they're in the library and they're having Snout's birthday party, like you'll see shots of like Peter Bruegel's paintings of like the Winterscape, and it's really hard to pin in an interpretation. But I just wanted to get your thoughts. What did you feel about the whole focusing on like what was just like random artwork?
Yeah, and I think again it goes back to that word memory. I think it probably was a painting that he was staring at as a child and couldn't kind of understand why, and maybe his parents had the replica of the painting in the house, and that's what kind of he connects his memories to, and that feeling of melancholia or loss to it. It's I think it's, if I were to interpret it, I think that's what it is. We don't, what's the meaning of them? There's no meaning of that painting. It could have been a different landscape painting, but I think it's specific to him. And going back to the shots that you were saying, how stunning they were. And that's what I'm also kind of like learning as a filmmaker is we can get as technical as we want, but I think once you put emotion to it and your own memories and how you felt at a certain moment in your life, that definitely enriches how you frame and where you position your camera. I know it sounds a little
right.
but,
To a layman, it wouldn't make any sense. But to anybody who is either a director or writer, or cinematographer, that would make sense.
Yeah, it's very because it's very specific to every filmmaker. If they put their emotion to every shot that they make, it will definitely change things. And I think that's what he goes from. Yes, it's this beautiful hallway of things are kind of broken in there, right? As I remember, but we do see these large windows on the left where there's just this fog and whiteness in there. And stays with you for some reason, even though it's not as impressive as Space Odyssey spaceship, right? It's rotating and whatnot. It's just very static, but it's very impactful. And I think because he loads his shots with his own emotions and memories.
But I think that's what makes it, all the more powerful, and it is the fact that there's nothing else to distract our attention. We have to focus on what's going on with the characters, and the fact that you have this psychiatrist or psychologist who is forced to confront his own personal failure, i.e. having to see his dead wife. I feel like that in itself, is a compelling storyline.
Yeah.
But to add on these additional layers of being in a space station and possibly dealing with a sentient world that's probing memories and manifesting, our deepest thoughts into physicality. I think that just adds more to the mystique. I would say, and again, this is just my interpretation, because we've already discussed two romantic comedies. I would say that this is a more tragic film because of the fact that whereas in the previous movies, the characters they get a resolution. Here there is no resolution for the protagonist because his wife doesn't come back to life, right? In fact,
Right.
that manifestation, I think she gets killed, or she asks the scientist to kill her, so he
Right.
doesn't have to keep going on.
У вас превосходный экземпляр.
Это моя жена.
Замечательно. Прекрасно.
So there's just so many, like you said, so many layers to it, where it could take days and days for us to, sort of figure out, or even come to a consensus of what we think the overall theme is.
Right.
I think another element that makes it even more compelling is that score that plays over and over again. And I think it's from Bach.
Yes.
And when you hear it, to your point, you can't help but feel melancholic because of the fact that because it just carries with it the pain, the suffering, and the fact that you don't know what to do, this helplessness. And it just fits in the whole storyline, because there really is this element of helplessness. There's really nothing you can do. That planet is just going to do what it wants, and you just have to go along with it.
And also, I forgot to mention, as I was reading the credits, the sounds were designed at some experimental sound studio. I don't know.
That's right.
Somewhere he found it, probably, maybe not in Moscow, but maybe St. Petersburg or something, because that's where most artists are.
Yeah.
But that's very interesting. Yeah, the sound and music really works well here too.
Yeah, I mean, and as a filmmaker, you understand, just how important the score is, because a really good score can amplify the the moment in the scene, whereas if you choose the wrong score, it can completely negate any intentions you might have in wanting to make the scene either powerful or have any resonance with the audience.
Yeah, I always say that music is the best thing that humans ever invented, because it just tugs somewhere on the inside, and you don't need to analyze it. You just feel it. It has that immediate impact. I think even faster than visuals. Once you hear the notes and hear the melody or the sounds, even, it just kind of it's so integral to who we are as beings. It's in our blood somehow, before even the images come in, because even if you listen to the soundtrack to this, maybe without the pictures, it will make you feel the same thing.
And I even listened to that Bach piece afterwards. I'm like, it totally fits with the movie.
Yeah.
No, I will say this too, because because this wasn't an original script. This was based on a novel written by Alexander Liu, and Liu himself was involved in the writing of the script. But even then, Tarkovsky added a few elements to it. So like the intro, the beginning scenes where the committee is interviewing the pilot, that wasn't in the novel. That's something that Tarkovsky added on his own.
If I'm honest, I think it was based on a book by a Polish writer.
It's Alexander Liu. Yeah, or Stanislaw Lem. Sorry,
Stanislaw. I don't even can't pronounce. Stanislaw Lem.
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 Lem. That's right. Yeah, Stanislaw Lem, because they got Stanislaw Lem to help co-write the script for that movie. Now, I didn't realize this until later on. There was another version of Solaris that was released probably like 20 years ago that starred George Clooney.
Yes.
And I remember at that time I thought, this is like a really, really weird movie. And I watched bits and pieces of it, but it didn't have the same resonance as Tarkovsky's version, right? Because I think here they kind of overdo it on everything. So everything that Tarkovsky railed against about the focus on technology and trying to make a sci-fi movie more sci-fi, Steven Soderbergh is guilty of when he made that version of Solaris. And I think that's why, the 1972 version is far superior than the remake.
Here, we're under the pressure of making money with film, no matter how personal or artistic we think it is. There's always this underlying pressure. Somebody's financing this film, so they're expecting it to make money. So every decision that's made about the aesthetics and the tools and the design of the film or structure of the film kind of somehow is influenced by the fact that at the end of the day, this film needs to make money or I will never make another film, you know? And having George Clooney and that brilliant actress that plays his wife, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name, but she's so great in it. It's just, you know, not enough to sustain the commerciality of the film, I think, maybe. I mean, you know, I'm not the one to criticize other films necessarily, but you're right. If you're comparing the two films, the original film is loaded with his unique personal emotions and personal memories. Again, that word, you know, yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, for anybody who's getting into Soviet films or Russian films, I would highly recommend watching Solaris as one, if not the intro film, at least one of the first films you should watch in order to understand. Because another thing too, because when I was watching it, it made me think of Dostoevsky, because you know, just like Tarkovsky, Dostoevsky isn't just going to take you on a straight line. He kind of weaves in different storylines and different concepts and ideas, you know, along with the main story. And that's sort of what you see with Tarkovsky, is because he's not going to, you know, get you from point A to point B, you know. But that's why we love it. It's because, you know, these are movies that make you think and are very thought provoking. So we're getting close to the end. So Art, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to discuss these films. We definitely need to come back soon to discuss more Russian films, because you gave me a huge list. And I also do want to talk about other films made in the other Soviet countries. I think I told you I was watching a movie called The Teutonic Knights, which was made in Poland in the 1960s. So maybe that's something we can take a look at later on.
I would love to, yeah. And thank you again for having me. This was so much fun, and I feel like I've heard you kind of opened my eyes to other elements in the film that I've seen, and your interpretation of it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to watch it again.
But that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, but that's the thing. It's because with the, you know, with certain films, you know, you can walk away with like one conclusion and you're not wrong. So like for instance, with The Girls, I mean, we definitely know what happens at the end. And then with Office Romance, we know Anatoly and Ludmila, they get married and they have another kid, as it says at the end. But with Tarkovsky, and I feel like at some point we should do an episode where we just focus mainly on Tarkovsky as a person, because he is such a mysterious figure to me. And he also comes off as a sort of like the enfant terrible of Soviet filmmaking, because all the other filmmakers in the USSR, they pretty much followed the playbook. Tarkovsky comes off as someone who's like, he's like, okay, I'll do it, but he has his fingers crossed behind his back. So like, as soon as you give him the money, he's going to make something completely different.
Right, 100%. And imagine walking into the office and there's a whole committee sitting in front of you, most likely men in suits, and they probably know nothing about cinema, but they're there to make sure that you adhere to the rules. And you're pitching Solaris, and it's based on the book. Fine, we know what the story is, but I'm making it this way, and then I'm making it this way. It's all about memories and emotions. And imagine him doing that. That you have to have balls. You have to be like this rebel that's not scared of, you know, rejection, and not scared of being completely shut off from the system. Yeah, you gotta give him credit. Yeah.
Well, also remember too. I mean, the book itself was pretty out there for the time. So it's not like Tarkovsky was playing with something that was completely original. He was basically taking a book that was pretty avant-garde, you know, at the time that it was written and published, and he was putting his own spin to it. So he's sort of like making it even more avant-garde as a result.
Right.
But yeah, we'll go ahead and just call it a day at there. But I just want to thank everybody for taking time to watch the episode. And let us know down in the comments below what you think of our discussion of Soviet films, and if there are any movies you want to recommend, let us know. Take it easy, everybody.